Funding for this video is provided by Frosty and Losers Pockets. Though in spirit, this video is brought to you by Rocky Merch. Stay tuned for more about that later with an informative yet nonetheless interesting interstitial dedicated to the matter. Additional sponsorship also provided by Arby's, they have the meat. Well, okay, it's not sponsored by Arby's, but wouldn't that be funny? It's 2024, and that means ARMS will be 7 years old in June. To celebrate that fact, we've gathered the most relevant and up-to-date resources on ARMS ranked mode to truly analyze the state of the game 7 years after release. In order to fully showcase these resources, we'll need to actually play on ranks, so thankfully the final piece of the puzzle is directly in our grasp. It's so easy, just a button away. It's relieving knowing that this will only take mere seconds. 7 years after the game was initially released. In anticipation of our evidently eventual ranked match, let's indulge in another form of ranking, a top 10. Although, we've already been waiting for a small while now, so we'll likely have just a bit more time. How about we try for a top 42 instead? It's time to rank all of the ARMS in ARMS. In 2024.
I'm buff!
Ah yes, before we get to the biggest disappointment in the game of ARMS, we should specify that no ARM in the game is all bad. In fact, each of them are fairly well designed overall. Anyways, here we go. Absolutely putrid. Vile in every manner conceivable. This is a perfect way to describe Ninja. Of course, the worst ARM in terms of our arbitrary personal preference is one of the student of stealths, being the buff. There is no point in obfuscating the truth. This ARM frankly resembles Ninja crunched into the shape of a fist, and if you thought that was boring, you'd be right. Especially considering the fact that this ARM has almost nothing going for it in gameplay that would otherwise make it unique or interesting.
Did you just call me Blob?
Thankfully, unlike the buff, the bob does not come off as a fighter morphed into a fist. Though it is certainly an ARM that exists, and it is not very good. It's about as interesting as its type. Oh yeah, it doesn't have one. There are 2 null gloves in the game and there's barely even any elaboration on its so-called differences in internal data when compared to its Ninja colored cousin. It's just referred to as beginner friendly. Funnily enough, we actually agree here. Bobs are likely to only be chosen by beginners who have yet to see or play with any other ARM in the game. In the end though, black and yellow go well together at least.
Field tournament style, up and down on the ground, monja plonja, blonja bonja, ishka bibble babble flabble, doma roma floma boma, jingle jangle, every angle, bricka bracka, flacka stacka, tooton, rerun, free for all, big ball.
A huge sphere is rarely a bad thing, and don't worry, the megaton is no exception. This big ball isn't bad at all by itself, although a certain DLC fighter's arsenal brought ruin upon it. After Misango's release, Violet became associated with the new poison attribute, but the first purple arm remained null. Unfortunately for Master Mummy's signature weapon, confusion is not a benefit. The third worst may be a stretch, though this is ARMS after all. What? Our worst 3 ARMS are all null. We suppose that trend should probably be broken with the next one, even if it'd only be by a spot or 2.
Bolt!
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 It makes enough sense that at least one of the tutorial characters' ARMS would be in the bottom 10, and, as expected, here's one now. The prospect of the stun attribute is a glorious concept, so while it'd be exciting to get to know an ARM that uses this attribute more closely, the Tri-Bolt is just so disappointing. While its name at least makes more sense than Trident ever did, the Tri-Bolt looks overly militaristic for what it's attempting to be. Unfortunately, this leads to it being a tad confusing on what its purpose is when inspected visually, and compared to most other ARMS it just ends up being a bit on the basic side.
Snap back to reality!
Alright, back to null ARMS. Even though attributes are only a small portion of ARMS, they don't always matter in terms of this ranking. So here's a brief verbal apology to all of the null enjoyers out there on account of their favorite attributes' inherent boringness. At least you all can get substantial enjoyment out of them comparatively. Thankfully, unique concepts can raise a boringly attributed ARM higher than their peers, though in terms of the clapback, only by a few spots. Its extended design is quite fetching compared to the still variant, but overall the clapback seemingly skipped design class despite being a straight A concept student. What about a fairly regular looking shield entails this arm's true intention in any capacity? Yeah, exactly. Nonetheless, if not anything else, at least the clapback alone allows you to slap a return to sender sticker on any of your adversary's incoming punches. You'd think that such a fierily named arm would give off enough heat to completely burn out your retinas, but the retorture isn't quite that hot. It's somehow lacking while also having too much going on with it. The greenish hue, the orange bullets, the tragic backstory. We're really going to celebrate this mistake? I don't think so. Its name, however, is its highlight, being a cheeky play on the arm that it plagiarized from. If you're looking for another multi-shot firearm, feel free to continue watching for the better one later on. Unless we get to our ranked match first, of course.
My name is Boom Boom. Boom Boom Boom.
Beating the boring competitive arm allegations, the Tri-Blast makes up for where the Tri-Bolt fails. Looking at this red rambunctious rascal, it's really clear that the Tri-Blast is either a fire or explosion attributed arm which, while still not fully clear, is definitely a step up in the clarity department. Although all of this is alluring, the Tri-Blast's acute use of orange directly near red makes its color scheme's purpose a tad obfuscated and therefore positively lacking in providing its possible potential precisely. In fighting games, a common symbol of aggression is a closed fist, but an open hand can be just as deadly. It surely would have been nice if someone slapped some sense into whoever designed the Aris's signature firearm. Just kidding, of course. The aptly named Slapperman pulls its gist off quite obviously, although it unfortunately ends up feeling somewhat simple at the same time. It's essentially a red mitten which is nice and warm. Definitely fitting for a firearm. Maybe just how fitting this glove really is for its concept is actually a detriment, though, as creativity isn't seeping out of its orifices unlike some later arms in this potential top 42. Alright, still no match, on to the next arm.
Said I hope nobody do a smash and grab.
Named after the throwing weapon of the same name, the Chakram makes sense as an arm but lacks a certain flaunty flair to really make it even close to fantastic. Its shape is surely something, definitely unique amongst most other arms, but its coloration has that certain smelly smell that simply smells like ninja. It doesn't fully reek of the stealthy college-age ninja, but it surely resembles its default user either way. The black innermost layer certainly helps to better balance out the blue-green, though more time in the metaphorical arm's creation oven could have possibly made it visually delicious enough to accidentally eat.
What about flaming shield tosser? Oh yeah.
Being the only firearm in the game to be designed to deliberately curve when dished out, the Ram's edge guarding potential is about the best thing that can be said about it. Nonetheless, its design is better than the ninja-ish Chakram, so it has that going for it. Which is nice.
What you seek here.
Having such a unique base design typically hinders the attempts at further iterations, and the Seiki is a perfect example of that. Being a missile, it will always carry the explosion burden, and thus one would typically be inclined to believe it's some kind of mini tactical nuke, though in reality its signature yellow is calling for a lightning storm. Due to this unfortunate circumstance, the Seiki is a pretty good okay arm that packs more of a punch in battle than some arms that are directly designed just to punch. Its best attribute is of course its beautiful eyes, an attribute only shared with a small pool of arms to be seen later, assuming our ranked match doesn't interfere.
1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
The second spheroid we've seen so far is none other than the Megawatt. It's just a yellow megaton, but due to lack of poisonous connotation, it's better. The waves upon its surface serve as a slight allusion to electrical arcs, and when you charge it, it indeed looks shockingly charged up. As the only heavy electric arm though, it is a bit of a letdown, but don't let that weigh down your spirits, Megawatt fanatics, if any of you even exist, that is. Did you ever want to wham, or even ram, your opponents with a slam? Well then, arms would certainly be a fun game for you, since you can do that with just about any arm. The only one whose namesake resembles the latter though is the Slamamander. Black and green contrast each other well, and this marks one of two arms to properly showcase the grassy hue of the wind icon. It still shares its simple side with the Slapamander though, so its story will cease here. Likely inspired by the explosive pain felt when hammering your thumb, the Whammer's younger brother has a very appealing look to it, though that's not to say it's the best in the clarity department. Unfortunately, this arm doesn't seem like an explosion arm, or at least not enough to really feel the explosion. Yeah, no, the Cuddlammer is nice, but has the lingering scent of halted potential that the several arms before this spot also have. Don't take all of this the wrong way though, the Cuddlammer is definitely redeemable regardless of its ranking here.
44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world.
Fights can be over quick in only one of two offensive circumstances: high skill disparity, or if you introduce a gun to the fray. Thankfully there are no actual sidearms in ARMS, but the revolver is basically named after one. Its overall design and color scheme scream electricity or machinery, which makes sense since it's one of Mechanica's default arms. Not that that second fact has weight in our ranking directly though. The spinning action and bullet firing both resemble its real-world counterpart in a satisfying way, though it definitely lacks a firearm's foreboding presence. Solid overall for sure, just no 44 Magnum.
Homies help homies. Always.
There may not be any guns in ARMS, but there certainly are a few literal bombs. Firebombs and shock bombs both bombard the battlefield throughout party match bouts, though in this case we are more so referring to the homie. An arm that's shaped like, looks like, and acts like a missile is perfectly fitting for the explosion attribute. It even has little eyes to watch as your opponents cry for help while they are incessantly homed in on. Unfortunately the homie does fall into the same trench as the Slapamander though, it's accurate to the point of lacking any additional creativity. Uniquely frustrating to face off against, we're not discussing Twintel, but instead one of her defaults. The Thunderbird provides a unique take on electric arms as its color scheme is that of the sky, where thunder originates and, of course, birds fly. With this said, the Thunderbird certainly has an air of cuteness to it that makes up for being on its bad side. Included in this cuteness are its babies, which can only be seen with a magnifying glass, though the other bird arm also has babies, so let's call that a tie in the arm babies department. The Thunderbird showcases the uniqueness of arms in ARMS, though in terms of arms of the bird type, it ranks as second best.
Purple is my favorite color!
Oh no. After the Ninjara incident, Max Brass has followed in his footsteps and has been crushed into a fighting fist. The roaster is one of three arms emblazoned with the Arms League logo, the other two being the buff and bug. But what makes this one so special? Well, its features more so represent a golden championship bout, possibly the very one snugly fitted around the commish himself. When charged, this alleged firearm brings a dark secret to light: purple fire. Although this could land where the Megaton placed, it's not permanently violet, and it's better because it's colored flames. What's possibly better than colored fire? I suppose 24 other arms.
Ew!
The first and worst placing poison arm on the list is none other than the Glusher. Despite its disgusting appearance, the Glusher is fun to bounce around even if its bounciness is limited by its surprising use of explosions that ignore its true designation. Unfortunately, its gross lumps combined with its plagiaristic untasty nature definitely results in a rather off-putting arm, though its red screen is a small glimmer of hope for sure. Perusing the arms menu and coming face to face with the Glusher can only elicit one reaction.
Check, please.
At least it's free of parasitic aliens.
Suddenly a terrible Garlon appears and attacks with ice.
Despite literally being the cooler dragon, the Ice Dragon is a tad less cool than the Evergreen Dragon. Although its remarkably funny name may inspire hope in generations to come, Helix's lowest ranked friend is a tad lacking in the color department. In a way we suppose its name conveys its visual blandness properly, it's embarrassingly overt in explaining what type the arm is. Instead of carrying unique attributes for a true ice dweller, such as icicles or snowflake iconography, the Ice Dragon subtly takes the iconic dragon and strips its paint. Due to the sheer amount of time that apparently took, it seems as though they could only afford to paint it blue afterwards. Nonetheless, at least the ice dragon looks cool. In fact, both dragons look cool in the grand scheme of things. Hence this arm's particular placement.
You know what they say, all toasters toast toast.
This may be a rather candid statement, but in reality the toaster is painfully average. Regardless of its averageness, the toaster's also kinda good at what it tries to be. Being a fire glove, the toaster is evident of its intent visually while its name fits to a T. Of course, this arm is the first arm of Arms Sys tutorial character, so it's a tad basic. But what's so wrong with that? We like that about it, it's nice. Some may say that the word boring could be used to describe its design, though we'll simply stick to the word basic as that fits its center placement on our ranking better. Anyways, it seems that our search for a ranked match has been a bit rocky so far, but that's actually good timing considering today's toaster-clad sponsor, Rocky Merch. Do you crave Arms merch with ties to the community? Or maybe you're in the market for a way to display your competitive nature to everyone you come in contact with? Let's settle on this at minimum. Everyone's a fan of rocks and even more people like Rocky. From comfy wearable Rocky apparel, to near impossible to complete Rocky puzzles, we have a huge variety for all of your Rocky needs. You can write your Arms fan fictions or personal Arms rankings in a Rocky adorned journal while counting the hours it takes to get a ranked match with your beautiful Rocky clock. It's even possible to potentially prevent the spread of perilous pathogens by placing a pretty Rocky face mask on your pretty face. Rocky merch really covers it all, except the stuff that it doesn't. If you're interested in displaying your love of Rocky or just want to peruse what's available, feel free to head over to this link and buy the goods. There are also some alternative Rockies at this link if you'd be more inclined for those variations. Remember that all proceeds made from Rocky merch will go towards running offline events in Ohio. Alright now, since that pesky ranked match still hasn't come, let's get back to the ranking. It's hard not to enjoy an arm like the parasol. Its design is self-explanatory, it's an umbrella of course. Admittedly its attribute, being wind, is a little hard to convey, though that's not fully a detriment here. Nonetheless, the parasol does its job of looking and acting like an umbrella very well and does so in quite the stylish fashion too. In fact, even Max Brass himself acknowledges this when making his grand return in high-level Grand Prix attempts. Did the parasol possibly persuade us to provide it a higher position due to this pint-sized point? Maybe, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Similar to one of the student of stealth's arms, the boomerang is named after a real-life curving weapon, though in this case it's even more appropriate. After all, real-life boomerangs come back to you after they're thrown too. It keeps its humble roots in terms of shape, but its overall concept is much more modern to fit in with Arms Sys universe. The only major downside to what is in essence the tutorial curving arm owned by the tutorial character, is that its coloration is intensely confusing. Red and yellow don't convey the wind attribute very well at all, but at least they complement each other fine on their own. The boomerang could have surely been a few spots higher on our ranking if it were green and yellow though.
Under my umbrella!
It's about time we talk about a rather underutilized arm added alongside a rather dominant fighter. Of course we're talking about the parabola. Although similar to the parasol, the parabola has the added benefit of being direct about its attribute. This is made as clear as possible from its design alone, while still maintaining the look of an umbrella, albeit an umbrella with a big eyeball on top. It's also worth noting that its name is a wonderful twirl on the parasols, being a mathematical term, hence relating to the rad scientist herself, and also starting with para to keep things consistent. Although ties to their default fighters are quite nice, it's worth mentioning once more that they do not matter in this ranking directly. Regardless of our wildly specific rules on the matter, it's always nice to see every now and then. Widespread throughout all kinds of media, nunchucks are a very fun weapon to watch when in the hands of a master, and in the case of the funchuck, are extremely not fun to watch if they're flying towards your face. Regardless of competitive reach, the funchuck introduced a complex type of arm in its debut and turned heads while doing it. Additionally, having two ways of using them in battle adds an interesting layer of depth that some other arms simply lack. Being as close as possible to looking like what a stun arm should look like, the Funchuck maintains arm's visual flair while staying true to its namesake. It's a literal nunchuck that's fun to use and watch, as long as you don't shield during their rush.
I know you want.
Finally, a wholeheartedly green wind arm. The popper is a perfect portrayal of the pretty popular party poppers used at, you guessed it, celebrations. From its conical shape, down to its frilly barrage of confetti that is seemingly impossible to escape, the inspiration for the popper's design is unmistakable. To whammer in the idea even further, a handful of streamers are painted across its surface to once again show you that yes, this is in fact a party popper turned weapon. It sure is well established what this arm is, no one would deny that, but maybe it's just a bit overdone in that regard. If this is a firework, then why is it a wind arm and not fire? Don't worry, we'll get to that in a few entries assuming our ranked queue remains as empty as our inbox on Valentine's Day weekend. Yep, seems that way for now. An imposing emerald and gold reptilian beast of ancient origin is such a generic descriptor for a dragon. But then why does it work so well for the dragon? Its design pairs well with Min Min's additional stretchy appendage which makes up for its lack of originality too. Though obviously that's not all, since relation to an arm's default fighter has no weight for this ranking. The standard analysis of this arm would be that of a Chinese dragon considering the ramen bomber's home nation. But the simplicity of it lends itself to a potentially global interpretation. This is aided even further with its name just being dragon. Regardless of where your fire-breathing beast hails from though, we can at least all agree that the dragon being a 4,000-year-old grilling machine is a strange choice for an origin, right? A celebration is an order, and no, it's not our ranked match. We are finally talking about a true firework of an arm. The cracker clearly understood the assignment, as it looks like a firework and, what do you know, it shoots fire too. It was mentioned earlier, but it's beneficial to bring up once more that the cracker is the cousin of the popper. Despite its more insidious color scheme, the cracker exudes its purpose ever so slightly more than its green cohort and as a result remains as the more emitting firework based arm on this ranking.
Hey big guy, is this thing gas powered?
Nah, baby. That's electric!
Yellow in arms screams electricity even though the attribute itself is represented with a blue icon. Nonetheless, a yellow boxing glove with a lightning bolt is the most obvious an electric arm can get, at least until we get the electric eel based arm we've all been craving. The shape of said bolt is aesthetically pleasing too, truly being made up of two perfectly placed segmented triangles. Sparky. That's not right. The Sparky is one of the, if not the, most effective arms when it comes to showcasing its purpose on its sleeve, or I suppose glove, if only it was a little more effective in the meta.
Grab onto my mighty hammer.
A child's desire to be violent can only be cured through one thing, a plastic hammer. Even though the whammer was apparently originally made for construction purposes, its appearance screams that of a classic squeaky hammer toy. Its playful colors and squishy ends makes this heavy hitter an honorary good boy even though it lacks any other potentially personifying peculiarities. The dash of neon green reeks of the stun attribute too, which helps this arm considerably in battle, though we think it would comparably still fare the same in efforts to wham some moles regardless of its color scheme. One of the few arms that relate back to the origins of their default fighter specifically, the Phoenix represents Master Mummy's resurrected state of physicality. Though since we already reiterated that it doesn't matter for this ranking, we'll dive into the theatrics of this black bird instead of elaborating on that connection any further. The Phoenix of legend portrays a bird rising from ashes, and there's certainly fire if there's ash. With that said, the Phoenix is undoubtedly a much better combination of design, attribute and name compared to the Thunderbird. Since it is much more cohesive, the Phoenix finally lets the bird type arm category thrive once and for all.
Skulls? Skulls mean bad medicine.
If the Phoenix is a bird that rose from the ashes, the Scully must be a bird whose resurrection was never granted. Its bare bones approach portrays the grim danger that poison presents in the real world, but in a way that feels fitting for the fanciful world of arms. although its description would have you thinking that it was but a skeleton of what it could have been. We disagree. Its aesthetics are more than appropriate in almost every way. Despite appearing lifeless, the amount of personality the Scully displays bears a good omen for the poison attribute as a whole, one that the Glusher could never quite procure. This battle-ready skull is sure to speed past even the hardest of sticks and stones, unless they're some kind of heavy arm, of course. I suppose it's somewhat humorous to note at this point that despite originally changing our top 10 to a top 42, this lengthy ranked wait has allowed us to go over 32 arms as a precursor to our true top 10, which we'll attempt to display now. Take the boomerang, now paint it blue, change its attribute, and give it a backbreakingly punny name, and you have just painlessly given birth to a beautiful baby Coolerang. This arm is very similar to its tutorial character-owned cousin, but its cool factor is more than evident to the touch. The light blue accents scream the ice attribute. Any darker and the hue could potentially seem like a blind arm instead, but nonetheless it avoids that issue entirely. When charged, the Coolerang becomes a freezing fan, which makes it not only fashionable, but also functional. It's just a really neat ice-attributed curve arm that oxymoronically feels warm at home at our number 10 spot. Some may say that it should have been ranked closer to the boomerang, but what can we say? This arm is much, much cooler.
I'm so cold that I'm shivering.
Hopefully your attention span is long enough to remember what we said about Sparky, or should we say the Sparky? If you do, take that praise and crank it to about -100 degrees for the chiller. This arm exudes coldness, and it does everything in its ice cold power to prove to you that this thing is freezing. The chiller even has a gauge on it indicating its low temperature, which is great for those who care about temperature gauges. Nonetheless, this arm is one of the best examples of an attribute applied to a specific type of arm, as its icy look and its glovish shape convey everything it needs to perfectly. Although the chiller has everything you need to live a nice life of ice, there is one other ice arm that is somehow even chillier. The precipice of all ice arms is none other than the only one whose name can't be said without being affected by its freezing presence, the Burchuck. This arm's cis ice power is so powerful that it can't even handle it fully. Just look at its hand. It's a cute little mitten. That chilling detail, in addition to the ice-colored spikes and square-shaped chains, increase the Burchuck's style points to a snow-covered summit worthy of some of the best arms that ARMS has to offer. Unfortunately for Burchuck bros, there are 7 arms that, in our humble opinion, rise above this peak. Will we get to those though? If our recent history in match-finding luck is anything to go by, yes.
Ron, why do you have this bag of bowling balls in this terrarium filled with scorpions?
It must be minutely evident that the third poison arm had yet to be ranked, so let's fix that. The Scorpio sports the purple pigment we all know and potentially love. The purple that's associated with the poison attribute, and of which is a huge reason why it's in the top 10. Wait, what?
That thing's green. Why is it green?
You're probably thinking, so let's rephrase that. The Scorpio's odd color scheme is, speculatively, fully deliberately green. This coloring only serves as a means to confuse the opponent, as a poisonous creature would sport similarly deceptive colors. All of this pales in comparison to the true reason the Scorpio is such a unique arm though. Scorpions are poisonous creatures. This arm is a creature. The Scorpio is a poisonous armed creature. Even accounting for its multitude of offensive stylings, the Scorpio packs a punch as potent as its poison, and that's just peachy perfect in our perception.
Hail Hydra.
Similar to certain projects within the MCU being street level, the Hydra could be seen as a street level arm. The graffiti-laden exterior exudes this expertly with the Speed Demon's logo hidden within it. But in reality we should really stop bringing up an arm's ties to its default fighter, since it has no bearing on this ranking. Ahem. Anyways, the Hydra also sports a sight to make precise aiming possible, which is often utilized to catch airbound foes and to get its rush to actually connect properly. This attachment's integration in its silhouette almost provides the arm with a handish shape overall. The sight as the thumb and the projectiles as the fingers, which is greatly appreciated over some other arms' extremely boring and direct fist-like approach. The Hydra is also a firearm so it checks matching its attribute, maintaining a street level applicability, and does both with a healthy dose of creativity. Just like the famous three-headed beast of legend, the Hydra is a 3-4-1. Oh look. Now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for, the top 5. What? You thought we got a ranked match? We wish. If we don't get one soon, then all of our proprietary ranked research and statistics will remain classified to the public. Whatever, we suppose. Onwards to our pick for number 5. A friendly face is always welcome in times of need, and when you're up against a Guardian user, you're bound to need its perpetual smile when the realization sets in that you're out of your league. Regardless of its strangeness overall, the Guardian is a treat of an arm. An arm with a face is already an exciting existence, but the Guardian essentially only being a face causes even more delight when seeing it in action. Its electric aesthetic isn't quite apparent from an initial glance, but considering its already wonky, rather shocking nature, it gets a pass. On top of this, its mannerisms while active, both charged and not, are always alluring to perceive. As a final plus, the Guardian's leafish appendages proudly displaying the ticking clock pertaining to its lifespan is an amazing detail that allows for both competitors to be well informed of the Guardian's well-being. It's too bad that a Guardian's owner will struggle to see their pal's beautiful face directly, as the only other Guardian visible in a possible fight is one of the enemy's similarly smiling Guardian pals. Knowing that they'll smile even without your company kinda puts the whole user-arm relationship into perspective, doesn't it?
Blows up!
As a pretty prime, perfectly powerful and rather pertinent reason for the pre-penultimate arms precursor on our ranking to exist, we'll provide the proper perk that it finally procures a perceivable change to the glove arm type. The nade serves as an amazing pun name, but also keys you in on what this arm is all about. It's a grenade. Although it doesn't explode when you overcharge it, the nade serves as the explosion glove arm. The feature that enamored us enough to place it in the top 5 is quite simple. It's stunning. Or should we say, explosive design. A grenade representing a hand with the handle being the thumb is an awe-inspiring choice and, even regardless of its dominance in some competitive circles, makes the nade truly blow the competition out of the water. Overall, the nade is a formidable arm in essentially every way imaginable, but even that is not enough to make it to the top 3 of this ranking. And everyone's honestly favorite arms league commentator is Biff, and so it only makes sense that the singular arm to represent him is ranked within our top 3. The Biffler is not only covered with Beffness, but also obfuscates an opponent's ocular port with Beth's visage utilizing blind flavored stamps. Additionally, Biff isn't a fighter, so this actually does matter this time around. The speed of the stamps are also quite considerable, which practically doubles down on the blind attribute, with them being near impossible to see when airborne and all. The combination of yellow and blue could seemingly denote electricity based on some other arms, but the Biffler paradoxically gives off vibes that no electric arm could ever wish to muster. Biff's voice echoes through our ears and his warm personality resonates in our hearts. But the Biffler is the one to truly allow the trusty commentator to stick to our skin and stain our eyes. Whether Biff himself helped create the Biffler or not, this beacon of Biff is the best of the bunch in terms of multi-shot arms, but in terms of blind ones there is another later on that is simply better.
Yo, listen up, here's the story.
If you thought that last bit of information in the previous entry was deliberately designed to obfuscate the arm that placed second, then, well, that was your mistake. Just one arm in the game can truly be described as glorious, and it's most certainly not any arm besides the Blob. Not only does the Blob provide a fun and wondrous way of attack, bouncing to its possible heart's content, but it's also extremely delicious, and everyone knows the lack of competition it has in the yummy department. Regardless of what some people may say about it, the Blob is simply built different, literally. On top of its timeless and utterly mind-boggling design, the Blob also provides a gorgeously eye-obfuscating blue splatter that not only lessens your opponent's view but also provides potential powers against some of the game's most feared formidable foes. Let's dive into that briefly. Dr. Coyle? The juicy blob bits that rub off on an opponent's face prevents the rat scientist from turning invisible on wake up. Clapback popper shenanigans? The bouncy delicious orb can fly right over that pesky arm number 38. Complaining T-list worshippers? Well, you got me there. Even further than anything we've brought up throughout this ranking so far, the blob can team up with itself to make a potent bouncing grab that has a strangely lower than normal damage modifier despite the fact that it is obviously a heavy arm. Isn't that great? The blob defies all odds that come its way and is near unbeatable, with regards to our list at least, but there is one specific orb-like device that defies even more odds that we believe deserves the number 1 spot more than any other arm currently in existence.
Fireball.
If you've put in enough hours to unlock all of the arms, then you know that number 1 is none other than the Lockjaw, baby. To start off on this orb-like Legends accolades, unlike all other explosion arms in the game, the Lockjaw will not explode on its user when clipped. This stat alone makes it more practical and more powerful than any other arm in its type. Yes, its notably near nuclear rush can backfire onto the lowly player who attempts to wield its power, but that can only occur at fault of the player, not the Lockjaw itself. Speaking of its rush, not only is it immensely powerful in its own right, but it can also be used to entirely annihilate an opponent who dared to use anything besides double Lockjaw as well. And wait, there's more. Its design. The Lockjaw takes the best of each arm and makes it even better. For example, the Guardian's friendly face is nice, but the Lockjaw is a whole head full of crazy thoughts, in arm form of course. Its beautiful red eye and perfectly golden teeth make it a friend worth staying in touch with, even despite the fact that you'll more often than not be touching its fiery blasts instead of its cold metal plated skin. Overall, its design is reminiscent of the menacing and fierce Final Foe headlock, but it trades his iconic intimidation factor for cuteness. Even its creators agree on the Lockjaw's adorableness, though whoever wrote its official description somehow disagrees with this fact. While this ranking is more of a general sort, we'd no doubt be forced to rank the Lockjaw as the number 1 most adorable arm as well. Even further so, the Lockjaw would likely top most lists it'd be eligible for if we're being totally honest. Whether it's trying to bite you, shoot you, or simply smile at you, the Lockjaw is undoubtedly an unforgettable arm and most certainly the top arm of our ranking. It's nothing short of an underrated masterpiece. Well, that's all the arms in arms ranked. Speaking of ranked, it seems that our journey will come to a close soon and unfortunately that doesn't mean we got a match. We put a lot of effort and energy into this completely impromptu ranking, so we'd greatly appreciate a like, subscribe, comment, or even if you could share it with your best friends we'd still appreciate you. Thank you all for watching, feel free to enjoy the ensuing credits, and, oh yeah, happy April Fool's Day.